Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Hello there. Kiara, we need to chat. Let's make a time on Discord. I hope you're doing well. So last time we stopped on page 19. I'm just going to go back a little bit to give a little bit of context as to where we're continuing. So here she's talking about London-based work. Dr. Harold Moody and his relationship with a white woman and their biracial children. So I'm going to read from page 18. As Dr. Harold Moody was doing pioneering work for black people while he was based in London, an aspect of his personal life, his relationship with a white woman and their mixed-race children, was seen as a point of great contention in British society at the time. Mixed-race relationships were controversial in the early 20th century, and in the northwest of England, these relationships were considered disturbing enough to justify academic research. Why is that not surprising? It was under apartheid where they considered interracial relationships as man mating with a dog. Yeah, that is what the apartheid government saw it as. Which to me is fucking wild. Because it's the same language that they use for queer people now. In the late 1920s, the University of Liverpool was solidifying its social science department, headed up by anthropologist Rachel M. Fleming. Her research was on what she called hybrid children, those with black fathers and white mothers. Oh, what an awful term. Ew. City, there were plenty of black seamen who had taken up permanent residence. Academics estimate that Liverpool's black population was 5,000 at the time. Against the backdrop of race-fueled riots and the lynching of Charles Wotton, mixed-race relationships did exist, but were seen by many as a social problem that needed to be stamped out. Hybrid, yes. Hybrid children. Ew. It was in this context that Rachel Fleming won the support of Liverpool's authority figures to research Liverpool's wretched, read mixed-race, children. She founded the Liverpool Association for the Welfare of Half-Caste Children. Ugh. The Liverpool Association for the Welfare of Half-Caste Children in 1927. Yeah, it does. Oh. Muriel Fletcher, a University of Liverpool graduate working as a probation officer, was tasked with writing the association's first report. Her work meant that through welfare services, she had contact with some of the poorest families in the city, and it was through this skewed lens with some of Liverpool's poorest mixed-race families that she conducted her research. So you can already see that the study was fucked from the beginning. The report on an investigation into the colour problem in Liverpool and other ports was published in June 1930. This is not the first time I asked this question today. Why are white people? It concluded with scant evidence that venereal diseases were more likely to be sickly because of this. Quote, the children seemed to have frequent colds. Many were also rickety, and several cases were reported in which there were bad family histories for tuberculosis. unquote. Perhaps reflecting popular attitudes at the time, Fletcher deemed mixed-race girls and women as tainted by their race, writing, quote, "Only 2 cases have been found in Liverpool of half-caste girls who have married white men, and in one of these cases, the girl's family forced the marriage on the man," unquote. In her report, Muriel Fletcher organized the mentally weak, prostitutes, the young and reckless, and those who felt forced into marriage because of illegitimate children. Children who were researched in the study had their eyes examined and their noses measured, with facial features categorized as either, you know the word, or English. Commenting on the fact that mixed-race young adults struggled to find work, Fletcher wrote, "Mothers of a better type regretted the fact that they had brought these children into the world, handicapped by their color." Kat, we really shouldn't be surprised when we speak to people on TikTok about human rights, that they do mental gymnastics to justify their positions. Because if this is not mental gymnastics, I don't know what the fuck is. Echoing the hugely popular eugenics movement at the time, it seems that Muriel Fletcher thought that children of mixed-race relationships had. The eugenicist movement believed that social class was determined by biological factors such as intelligence, health, and the vague criteria of moral values. Eugenicists argued that those with desirable qualities should be encouraged to reproduce, while those without should be discouraged. The racism was inherent. Whiteness was to be aspired to, whereas any hint of black heritage was considered a kind of contamination, leading to a hard line against mixed-race relationships and people. Despite support from influential names like John Maynard Keynes and George Bernard Shaw, there was no legislation passed in Britain to cement eugenics into the workings of the state, like forced sterilization. And a 1931 private a small mercy, I guess? On publication, the report on an investigation into the colour problem in Liverpool and other ports had a national impact, with the representative of the Anti-Slavery Society report, academic Mark Christian, argued that it had been a long-lasting negative effect on the black people of Liverpool and cemented the term half-caste. We have seen dozens and dozens and dozens of reports like this, kind of pseudoscientific studies that have been done discouraging anything that remotely resembles blackness, essentially. I mean, we've been reading it in Inglorious Empire by Shashi Tharoor, of how the British referred to dark-skinned Indian people and how their version of the caste system is what people see today. People who are disabled, people who are of darker skin. That was all a European invention. So why are white people so obsessed with color? I think this is a good question to ask and interrogate. Why are white people so fucking obsessed with color? The aftermath of yet another world war brought with it fresh labour demands, and Britain once again encouraged immigration. When the SS Empire Windrush sailed from the Caribbean to England, it carried 490 Caribbean men and 2 Caribbean women, all of whom were prepared to muck in with the job of restoring post-war Britain's empire. Only as long as it serves empire. As soon as it starts benefiting the people, then no, immigration bad. The Windrush docked at Tilbury in Thurrock, Essex, on 22nd June 1948. That same year, the government introduced the British Nationality Act, a law that effectively gave Commonwealth citizens the same rights to reside as British subjects. Now, why this is interesting. A lot of people took advantage of this. A lot of people of color took advantage of this, and I don't think that they anticipated just how many people of color would take advantage of this. And then they regretted that decision later. The country's black population continued to rise. Between 1951 and 1961, the Caribbean-born British population grew from 15,000 to 172,000, with the majority of these people from Jamaica, an increase in population from 6,000 to 100,000. By 1958, Nottingham's black population numbered 2,500. But a decade of legislation explicitly welcoming Commonwealth citizens into Britain had not changed attitudes on the ground. It never did. And I don't think it ever will. White people are just too racist. Quotes from a local newspaper reported a colour bar in Nottingham's pubs, with black men expected to stand aside until white people had been served. White resentment towards the city's black residents was rife, and black resentment at white resentment was simmering. And this is important. Black resentment at white resentment. This is the root of anti-white prejudice from black and brown people. It comes from nowhere else. It is a response to racism. It is a response to whiteness. Any prejudice that people of color hold against white people. Yeah, exactly. It is not against the people, it is against the racism. There's absolutely no way that white people can and ever will experience racism. And a black man spiraled out of control. Reports on what sparked the following events are sketchy. What we do know is this. Later that day, 1,000 people had crowded into St. Anne's Well Road, ready to riot. Razors, knives, and bottles were used as weapons, and 8 people were hospitalized. Nothing happened in Nottingham was also occurring. What happened in Nottingham was also occurring in other parts of the country. On 20th August in Notting Hill, West London, a group of teddy boys, young rock and roll loving white men who wore creeper shoes and suits, set upon the streets with the sole objective of attacking black people. I remember reading about this in high school. They called themselves the N-word hunters. That night, their violent spree put 5 black men, in hospital. At the time, Notting Hill was poor and overcrowded, with desperation for housing exploited by the notorious slum landlord Peter Rachman, whose reputation was so poor that his name became a synonym for bad treatment of tenants. Chambers' 21st Century Dictionary defines Rachmanism today as an exploitation or extortion by a landlord or tenants living in slum conditions. It was black people who fell prey to Rachman. No blacks, no dogs, no Irish signs in the windows of other more respectable properties. This only exacerbated poor race relations in the capital. 9 days after the N-word hunting spree from Notting Hill's teddy boys, a mixed-race married couple, a black man and white Swedish woman, were arguing outside Latimer Road tube station. It was an August bank holiday, and with many off work, the argument drew a crowd of white men who jumped in to defend the woman, perhaps believing that she was under attack. Spotting the onslaught, some black men got involved to support her husband. they began fighting each other. Later, interviews with white rioters suggest that there was a rumor going around that a black man had raped a white woman. We were talking about it in the lecture that I attended earlier today on feminist speech and resistance. Somebody raised the question of Palestinian masculinity. As feminists, Palestinian masculinity as feminist discourse. And what I said in that discussion was, Black, Indigenous, and men of the global majority have always been demonized as the eternal rapist, and therefore justifying violence against them. Because the white woman always needs to be protected, and the black and brown man always has to be punished. Think a little on that. The scuffle outside the train station quickly escalated into 200 white people roaming the streets, chanting racist abuse. Not much has changed. As the fighting intensified, white rioters berated the police for holding them back from attacking black people, and the riot stretched on for 3 whole days. Swastikas were painted on the doors of black families. Black people fought back with weapons and makeshift Molotov cocktails. Those black people who were stopped in the street by the police during the violence stressed their need to defend themselves. No fatalities were recorded, but over 100 people, the majority of them white, were arrested. In 2002, prematurely released government files revealed that police detectives had successfully convinced then Home Secretary Rab Butler that the Notting Hill riots weren't about race, but simply the work of hooligans. Of course they did. They always want to rewrite history. Whereas there certainly was some ill feeling between white and coloured residents in the area, wrote Detective Sergeant M. Walters, it is abundantly clear much of the trouble was caused by ruffians, both coloured and white, who seized the opportunity to indulge in hooliganism. No mention was made of the N-word hunting teddy boys. This is whiteness. This is whiteness at work. This is how racism flourishes, through the passing of documents like these. After Nottingham and Notting Hill, race relations in Britain were rapidly deteriorating, as if it was ever something to speak about in any case. It was becoming clear to post-Windrush black people in Britain that they would not be allowed to live quietly, work, pay tax, and assimilate. Instead, they would be punished for their very existence in Britain. Black and brown labour had proved integral to Britain's success in both world wars, but black people themselves would face extreme rejection in the decades that followed, because they want our labour, they want what we can provide. Yes, they are guillotine earrings. The only way to make the rich stoppy is to go choppy. Throughout the 1950s, the government was reluctant to recognize that the country had a problem with racism. They still deny that England has a problem with racism. Like, no, racism isn't a problem anymore. But there was some movement. In 1960, backbench Labour MP Archibald Fenner Brockway repeatedly tried to bring forward a race discrimination bill with the aim of outlawing discrimination to the detriment of any person on the grounds of colour, race and religion in the United Kingdom. Every single one of the 9 times he tabled the bill, it was defeated. Of course it was. On the other end of the spectrum, in 1959, Oswald Mosley, founder of the British Union of Fascists, saw fit to return to parliamentary politics after stepping down in 1930. He stood in constituency near Notting Hill and advocated the repatriation of immigrants, losing with an 8.1% share of the vote. It wasn't until less than a decade after both the Nottingham and Notting Hill riots that the state attempted to pose a solution to Britain's racism problem. Coming into effect on 31st May 1962, the Commonwealth Immigrants Act drastically restricted immigration rights into Britain's Commonwealth citizens. Even the wording was different. The 1948 British Nationality Act used the word citizens to describe those from Commonwealth countries, and in 62 they were described as immigrants, adding a new layer of alien to people who had enjoyed the right to reside just 14 years earlier. With a new emphasis on skilled workers, the Commonwealth Immigrants Act stated that those wishing to move to Britain now needed a work permit to settle in the country. The logic behind this still prevails today. We have to jump through hoops to just get a holiday visa to go anywhere in the West. And sometimes those hoops are on fire. But all they had to do was show up and burn our shit down. And when people ask why we need reparations, this is why. I honestly think that every single person who resides in countries colonized by Britain gets automatic British citizenship. Surely we know someone. Thank you. Surely we know someone who can hack their systems. In Minecraft, of course. If somebody can hack the systems, their surveillance systems, and send the Bangladesh to Myanmar, I'm sure someone can do better work than that. Then, in 1965, Britain's first ever race relations legislation was granted by Parliament. The Race Relations Act was an odd move for the British government, having made such a strong statement against the free movement of Commonwealth citizens just 3 years earlier. The Act stated that overt racial discrimination was no longer legal in public places, although it did not apply to shops or private housing. Of course. At the time, the BBC reported these acts of discrimination including refusing to serve a person, unreasonable delay in serving someone, or overcharging. A race relations board was created as part of the Act. The purpose was to receive complaints of and monitor racist incidents. No mean feat when the 1961 census had put the general population at 52,700,000. There was no way of knowing the exact number of non-white people living in Britain, as the census did not include a question on race, all the way up until 1991. Barely any complaints were made to the board, and those that were made were almost futile. It had no authority to punish those against whom complaints were made. Instead, its role was one of mediation between complainant and organization or person being complained about. Britain's first Race Relations Act was tepid. It didn't tackle endemic housing discrimination. It had enough caveats to allow wiggle room for those who were intent on keeping black people in Britain as second-class citizens. An inadequate antidote to decades of targeted violence and harassment, the board appeared to exist only for posturing. Most black and Asian people in Britain didn't even know it existed. The Act's weaknesses were obvious. The efforts to challenge racism came from the very same state that sanctioned racism decades earlier with repatriation drives in the face of racist riots. The same state that picked up and disposed of black and brown bodies at its own convenience. Yeah, it's all to do with the convenience of empire. The Act was strengthened 3 years later, outlawing denial of housing, employment or public services on the grounds of race. However, government services were exempt from legal challenges. Of course. Hi. At the time, the BBC reported, "The new Race Relations Act is intended to counterbalance the Immigration Act and so fulfill the government's response to be fair but tough on immigrants." People who say that they like the BBC as a news source needs to remember, anybody who works for the BBC swears loyalty to the crown. Just saying. That's why I never want to work for them. Ever. Taking a bit of a breather. How are y'all doing? How is everyone? It is only Tuesday, and it has been a long week already. Have you set a police department on fire? It's Tuesday, isn't it? Ooh, that's interesting. Yeah, tell me about it. Because I like these. Somebody named Kronk just joined. Pull the lever. Oh no, baby Kiara. Of course I want to hear the dad jokes. You can send them to me on Discord. And I don't know if anybody is here on Twitch or YouTube. Nobody is in Discord. Wrong lever! Oh God. I'm not a fan of onions, but deep fried, much better. Wow. Wow, B. I know. I constantly say that you cannot self-care your way out of systemic oppression. But what you can do is take care of yourself to the point that you don't have to worry about your health failing in the midst of revolution. I didn't come across that joke, but I did make the joke because somebody posted a meme saying, congratulations on getting Shakira law in New York. My response was, yeah, Shakira law is the hips don't lie. When the punchline is apparent, Kiara, straight to Gulag. B's already in the Gulag. You can join him there. Yes, you can take care of yourself so that you don't collapse when we march through the streets. I have a therapy appointment tomorrow, and it is going to be just a lot of offloading onto my therapist, in the sense that everything that has been entrusted to me over the past few weeks is getting thrown at my therapist, because I'm like, no. I want to be there for my friends, but I do not have the spoons today. But I am going to be all by myself tomorrow and whole of Thursday, and I'm going to, that's what I'm doing tomorrow and Thursday. I'm just doing absolutely sweet bugger all. It is excellent. It's hard to be an introvert. Yeah. I mean, okay, I'm not that much of an introvert. I am very much an ambivert. Like, I'm extroverted until my my social battery just hits absolute zero. The rubbish movie that I'm going to watch tomorrow, well, the first one, it's not exactly a rubbish movie, but it's not exactly great. I mean, Roland Emmerich, he's got his moments. If the Antarctic had a soundtrack, it would be the soundtrack from The Day After Tomorrow. They are hilarious. 2012 was so bad. So fucking bad. Independence Day was fun. And I still watch it over and over again, just like The Day After Tomorrow. Don't get much time for self-care these days, a double-edged sword, because, yeah. Kiara will talk about that. Disaster movies are lost art these days. The Day After Tomorrow is the epitome of the movies that exist. No, Sharknado, never, ever say anything bad about Sharknado. Sharknado is wonderful. I love it. Kiara, we can have that conversation, because I also used to feel very guilty. Thank you. I used to feel very guilty about doing self-care, even though I felt better, because it felt like I was just indulging myself. We need to get ourselves out of that mindset of caring for ourselves equals not caring for anybody else, because it's not pie. But yeah, please do take care of yourselves, because you deserve to be taken care of. Right, back to page 28. On 7th March 1965, African Americans were beaten bloody on a civil rights march held by Martin Luther King Jr. AC, I am going to keep my mouth shut about that. They were demanding their constitutional right to vote. 2 years before that now iconic day in the west of England, 19-year-old Jamaican Guy Bailey made his way to a job interview with Bristol Omnibus Company, the city buses service. Paul Stevenson, a local youth worker, had arranged the interview for Guy, first ensuring that there were jobs available and that Guy had the qualifications to do the work. But when Guy turned up to his interview, he found it had been cancelled. Recounting his interview to the BBC 50 years later, he recalled the exact moment he was rejected by receptionists. She said to the manager, "Your 2 o'clock appointment is here, but he's black." And the manager said, "Tell him we have no vacancies. All vacancies are filled." AC, behave. That Guy was turned down was not a surprise to Bristol's 3,000-strong black community, the majority of whom had settled in Britain from the Caribbean after the Second World War. For them, racism in the bus service was a long-held suspicion. Many had interviewed with Bristol Omnibus Company only to be turned down. Everyone who worked at the bus company was white. But Guy Bailey's interview wasn't a coincidence. It had been set up by a small group of young men: Roy Hackett, Owen Henry, Audley Evans, and Prince Brown. They called themselves the West Indian Development Council. They asked Paul Stevenson to work with them on their plan, and he agreed. Paul already knew Guy, who was a student at the night school he taught at. Guy was a good interview prospect, clean-cut, already employed, studying part-time, and active in a Christian youth organization. As soon as Guy was refused an interview, the group arranged a press conference. Local reporters crowded into Paul's flat to hear exactly what had happened. The photo shoot was arranged with Owen echoing Rosa Parks by sitting at the back of the bus. As both local and national press reported on the case, and in London to admit it, but which of them will join a service where you might find yourself working under a coloured foreman? Paul and West Indian Development Council won the support of local students, saw speeches in favour of their cause from politicians, and earned sympathetic editorials in local press. But Paul was also repeatedly ignored by the bus company and the Transport General Workers Union. Though often divided by work disputes, both management and the trade union found themselves united by their racism. They had an agreement, the kind that lends itself well into discrimination. The bus company was not to hire anyone not already approved by the branch. Even though Patey's comments were on the record, the Bristol Omnibus Company deflected accountability, instead passing it along to the union. Racism had infected worker solidarity, with a union representative at the time insisting that more black workers would be taking away jobs for prospective white employees, and that employing them would mean reduced hours for current employees. As the campaign continued, Paul was harshly criticized. Ron Nethercourt, Southwest Regional Secretary for the union, wrote an article in a national newspaper calling Paul dishonest and irresponsible. For his critics, it was his activism that was the root of the problem, not the colour bar. Some of these statements led to a libel case, which Paul won. Meanwhile, every single one of the city's West Indian residents were boycotting the bus service. One campaign leader told the local newspaper, "Although it's hard to tell, many white people are supporting us." The campaign drew support from Trinidad's High Commissioner, Sir Leary Constantine. Sir Leary Constantine, what a great name. Over 100 university students marched in support, and everyone boycotting the bus service either walked or cycled. A meeting of 500 bus employees met and agreed to discontinue Bristol's Omnibus Company's unofficial colour bar. The day after, General Manager Ian Patey committed to ending it for good. Speaking at a press conference, he announced that the only criteria would be the person's suitability for the job. It's important to note that to date, Bristol Omnibus, now merged with another company, eventually renamed First Somerset and Avon, has never apologised for its actions. Neither has the Bristol branch of the Transport and General Workers Union, since merged with Unite the Union. In 2013, Lawrence Faircloth, Unite South West Secretary, offered Guy Bailey's sincere regret on behalf of the union. Reparations. We want fucking reparations. We don't want your sorry. We want reparations. I first learnt of the bus boycott as a graduate in 2013, when I was working at the Race Equality think tank at the Runnymede Trust. A small team of us travelled to Bristol to launch a campaign. As well as running a pop-up come and talk about racism shop, we held evening events around the city centre. One of those events was with Paul Stevenson. By then, he was in his late 70s. Upstairs, the event space of Foyle's bookshop, Paul's voice, withered by age and activism in righteous rage, commanded the attention of the whole room. It felt like I was listening to history. It feels like that when I hear my parents speak. This past Saturday was the first. No, not this past Saturday, the Saturday before. The 1st of November. There was a memorial for one of my parents' comrades who was killed by a white man. Only a year after apartheid ended, he was killed in a racist attack. Never really got to fully appreciate the fruits of his labor in fighting for the freedom of this country. And 30 years later, we held a memorial for him. And every single person who spoke there they're getting old. My father is 72. My mother's going to be 71. Thank you. People like Ronnie Casserol's is in his 80s. Mac Maharaj, also pushing 80, I think in his 80s already. They still hold such presence. Incredible presence, absolute awe of the work that they've done so that we can do the work we're doing now. that we can focus on the things that we are focusing on now. Because without their work, I wouldn't be here right now. If it wasn't for their work, we would still be fighting an unjust government instead of an unjust system. And now, I know it's really hard to divorce the two from each other. Thank you. But we would still be fighting the apartheid government. And now we're fighting the system itself. The system of colonialism, the system of racism, the systems of bigotry and inequality. Ultimately, we wouldn't be able to do that without these people, without people like Paul Stevenson. One protest had such a huge rippling impact. And when I look at my dad and the days and days and days that he spent in solitary confinement under arrest by the apartheid government, one campaign that he was involved in changed my life forever. And that was Operation Vula, to open up the country, to open up information coming in and out of the country, arming local military groups so that they could resist the apartheid regime. Why would I not support Hamas if I supported these resistance group? Tell me. Just saying. Somebody's cackling. Was that you, cat? Were you cackling? You cannot tell me that we have not made significant strides. I've seen it. I've seen how people have struggled to make those strides. And it makes me proud to be the daughter of struggle. Thank you. It makes me really proud to be the daughter of struggle, of the anti-apartheid movement. And I'm proud to be my parents' daughter. I also know that we have a long way to go. And I don't think that we will see the end of capitalism in my lifetime, but a boy can hope. I am going to, it is 10 minutes left. Still a long way to go in this chapter. Let me see. Thank you. Yep, I'm going to stop at page 38. So just 2 more pages to go. Around the same time as Bristolians were organizing themselves against the colour bar, white nationalist activity in Britain was gaining ground. The National Front, a whites-only anti-immigration and far-right political party, was stoking anger at resentment among British people. The song remains the same. The people's faces, they change, but the colour never does. And their song is always the same. Ooh, yo. Formed in 1967, the National Front has close links to white supremacist movements globally. At the height of their growth in the 70s, party members adorned themselves with Union Jacks and St. George's flags, as though they felt their politics represented the epitome of Britishness. No, that would be Vindaloo. Just over a decade after its formation, the National Front stood over 300 people in the 1979 general election and won almost 200,000 votes because white people are racist. Despite the growing popularity of white nationalist policies in Britain during the 70s, it was black and Asian people who were considered volatile members of society. Of course, because white people are racist. The National Front's membership eventually dwindled by the 1980s, but the sentiment of the party found its home in other forms of quote-unquote activism. In the 70s, police officers wielded a section of the then archaic 1824 Vagrancy Act, a cab all day, every day. The section in question gave the police the power to stop, search, and arrest anyone they suspect might commit a crime. The Vagrancy Act came to be known as sus laws, taken from the wording of the act that described a suspicious person. But the police didn't keep statistics on those they were stopping under the act, so it's difficult to know just how many people were bothered by the police for the crime of not looking respectable. Anecdotally, anti-racism campaigners say that black people were being unfairly targeted. Of course they were, by sus laws. Of course, because white people are racist. The notion of who does and who doesn't look suspicious, particularly in British political climates, that just 10 years earlier was denying black people employment and housing, was undoubtedly racialized. Sus laws ensured a fraught relationship between black people and the police. This was intensified by public panic about mugging and muggers. In 1972, a violent and fatal street robbery in Handsworth, Birmingham, led to near-constant press coverage of the street robberies for the following year. Mugging, an American term, imported from police statements and press coverage in black concentrated cities, increased the fear of mugging being imported too. Street robberies have always existed in Britain, but the importation of the word mugging brought with it coded implications that the perpetrators were overwhelmingly black, and that mugging was exclusively a black crime. Newspapers reported it was a new trend. The fear of mugging was about so much more than the fear of crime and violence. It was about anxieties of those who had been scared of black liberation struggles in the 60s, intense fears around race, reparations, and revenge. Because white people are so racist they cannot imagine a world that has equality, they can only imagine domination. There was at least one documented incident of police officers arresting black boys for the crime of looking like criminals. On 16th March 1972, at Oval train station in South London, a group of plainclothes white police officers targeted and tackled 4 young black men, who happened to be members of a radical black organization, on public transport. Later testifying in court that it was clear they intended to pick the pockets of passengers. But the only witnesses for the prosecution were the police themselves, and the accused young men had no stolen property on them. The Oval Four were imprisoned for 2 years each, but were released a year early on appeal. Every single one of them maintains innocence. Why are white people? Why are white people? When the police were busy arresting black people for looking suspicious, the National Front were capitalizing on the national anti-black feeling. In 1975, they organized a march against black muggings, which they led through London's East End. A year later, they found another white superpower cause to support. Leamington Spa bus driver Robert Ralph became a national news story when he put up a sign outside his house that said, "For sale to an English family only." A previous version of the sign was even more extreme. To avoid animosity all round positively, no colours. The sign contravened the Racial Relations Act and he was asked to take it down. He refused and was imprisoned for contempt. Ralph promptly went on a hunger strike, and the tabloid press used his imprisonment as ammunition to argue against what they call political correctness. Meanwhile, for the National Front, his were the actions of a martyr. They launched a campaign, organized Free Ralph protests. Ideas of blackness and criminality were becoming inherently interlinked. In 1984, 3 years after sus laws were scrapped, stop and search was introduced. Same. The initiatives seemed barely different. While sus laws allowed the police to arrest anyone they thought was loitering with the intent to commit crime, the new laws meant police had to have reasonable belief that the offence had been already committed before stopping and searching a suspect. Of course, the crime then became being black. While the police line has always been that such tactics prevent crime, black people have always been disproportionately targeted under stop and search. Research in 2015 revealed parts of the country where black people were 17 times more likely to be stopped and searched than white people. These were, and still are, sus laws by a different name. Between 1980 and 82, with the country in recession, unemployment for black and Asian men rose roughly 20%. Landscape, some white communities were still uneasy about their presence, of course, because white people are fucking racist. There was a feeling among us of social aggravation. In a radio documentary broadcast on BRMB Radio Birmingham in 1982, PC Dick Board, British names are funny, his name is Dick Board, a police officer working in the city, made his feelings about unemployed black people clear. Let's be fair, he said, we're talking about a certain type of people now. We all had these reasons in the 20s and 30s, and we never had this. Now, we never had the soaring crime rates we do now, as we know the is going to get his own way at the expense of everybody else. Sounds like white people to me, by hook or by crook, getting his way over everybody else. I wonder where those crown jewels are. That's his point. Never mind this unemployment business. We've got a situation here now that is being used deliberately. There's no question about it. They couldn't care less whether they've got a job or not. In fact, they're happier without them. He continued, all this is complete twaddle about what they're looking for jobs. I can't get a job. A lot of them use their color as leverage. They use it, and they use it very well. There's enough people in this country prepared to listen and turn a blind eye to what these people do. When PC Dick Board spoke about what these people do, he was referring to entire areas where black and brown people lived. Oh, makes me think of Sweden's no-go zones. Which are ridiculous. The summer of 1981 saw more riots across the country. In Brixton on 10th April, in Toxteth, Liverpool on 3rd July, Handsworth, Birmingham on 10th July, Chapeltown, Leeds in the same month. The social conditions of each area were similar. Poor, black. In both Brixton and Toxteth, police behavior was a contributing factor. Of course. Police just make things worse. Brixton, the first riot of the year, was sparked by Metropolitan Police's Operation Swamp, in which they performed over 1,000 stop and searches in just 6 days. When police officers stopped to help a wounded black boy, a crowd approached them and the situation escalated. In Toxteth, the police gave chase to a black motorcyclist, believing that the vehicle was stolen. He fell from the bike and police tried to arrest him, only to be confronted by an angry crowd. Again, the situation escalated. Riots, it seemed, were contagious. One common thing about the riots, though, start because of police action. Or should we call them slave catchers? Let's go back to calling them slave catchers. See how much sense it makes. ACAB all day, every day. That's it for the reading today. Same time, different book tomorrow. Remember to drink water, take your meds, eat something. If you don't have a meal for today, please message me with your PayPal and I will send you some money for food. Remember to smash the motherfucking patriarchy, eat all the white men, and if you don't eat meat, compost them. And remember to be kind, especially to yourself, because everybody deserves kindness. I do these readings for free, so please try to see if we can tackle that goal. I do need to make some payments, and let's help each other. Remember, I have the Second Breakfast Club in my server, where we are building a database of soup kitchens, food pantries, food banks, etc., all across the United States, so that we can get our people fed during the time where the government says no SNAP for you, and hopefully afterwards too. And yeah, let's tell people. Remember, I have a podcast. If you can subscribe to my podcast, that would be greatly appreciated. It is $1, $5, $10, or $20 a month, and I know finances are tough. I also have some spicy links in my bio if you are that way inclined, and I have a Discord, so join my Discord, and we can do the community thing, because community is far better than us being alone and trying to manage on our own, because we do better when we're with people. It reminds me of a last line of a poem. I can't remember the poem, who wrote it, where it's from, but when you go out into the world, remember that it is better to hold hands and stick together. And with that, thank you for spending time with me. Thank you for joining me. Goodbye to Twitch and YouTube. Bye.